In the annals of boxing history, legends are forged not only in moments of brilliance, but in the unyielding defiance of men who refuse to fall. Some champions dazzled with artistry, others overwhelmed with power. But then there was one man whose greatness came not from perfection, but from endurance, a fighter who welcomed punishment, who believed that pain was a doorway to glory, who turned his very body into a weapon of resistance. This is the story of Battling Nelson. He was born Oscar Matthias Nielsen in Copenhagen, Denmark, on June 5, 1882. Just a year later, his family crossed the ocean in search of new life in America. They settled in the industrial neighborhood of Hegewisch, on the southeast side of Chicago, where smokestacks filled the horizon and the streets were alive with the noise of immigrant struggle. The Nielsen family lived among steelworkers, railroadmen, and laborers who worked until their bodies broke. Poverty was constant. Opportunity was scarce. For young Oscar, survival meant toughness. The streets of Chicago did not forgive weakness. Bare-knuckle scraps in alleys and vacant lots were the classroom where he first learned to fight. By the age of 14, while most boys were still in school, Oscar was already stepping through the ropes of prize-fighting rings. He was undersized, unrefined, and poor, but he carried with him a raw resilience. He would take a punch, then another still, and come forward. That stubborn refusal to yield earned him his ring name, Battling Nelson, the Durable Dane. Chicago at the turn of the century was a city of contrasts. Immigrants flooded in, chasing the promise of industry and freedom, yet found themselves chained by grueling work and prejudice. In smoky taverns and makeshift gyms, boxing thrived as the poor man's theater. It was brutal, often illegal, but for many it was the only path to recognition. Nelson embraced that path fully. He did not box with elegance, he fought with hunger. His style was crude but relentless. He attacked the body, head down, fists pumping, absorbing blows until opponents broke under the weight of his endurance. By his early 20s, Nelson had already fought dozens of times, often in conditions that today would be unthinkable. Long, punishing bouts that tested not just skill, but human endurance itself. He suffered cuts, broken bones, swelling that sealed his eyes. But he never considered quitting. He fought not merely to win, but to prove that nothing could break him. In 1904, his relentless march brought him to his first shot at the lightweight crown against Jimmy Britt. It was a brutal contest, but Britt edged him on points after 20 grueling rounds. For most men, such a loss would be crushing. For Nelson, it was fuel. He had felt the nearness of the championship, and he would not rest until it was his. Defeat after defeat, Nelson learned. Against Abe Attell in 1905, he came up short, but then came Jack O'Neill and Nelson crushed him, earning another chance at Britt. This time, on September 9, 1905, Nelson unleashed the full measure of his stubborn will. For 18 rounds of a scheduled 45, he absorbed Britt's sharper boxing, waiting, pressing, punishing. Then, with brutal precision, he ended the contest with a knockout. The title was his, Battling Nelson. The immigrant boy from Denmark, raised in the steel shadows of Chicago, was now world lightweight champion, but his reign would be defined not just by titles, but by the wars that followed. And none was greater, none more brutal, than his collisions with Joe Gans, the first African-American lightweight champion, known as the Old Master. Gans was everything Nelson was not: refined, strategic, elegant. Where Nelson absorbed, Gans delivered. Where Nelson brawled, Gans painted with fists. They were opposites destined to collide, and their battles would become legend. On September 3, 1906, in Goldfield, Nevada, the two men met in a fight that would test the limits of human endurance. Under the scorching desert sun, in front of a roaring crowd lured by the largest purse ever offered for a fight at the time. They fought not for rounds, but for survival. Gans knocked Nelson down repeatedly, his skill carving open the Dane's face and ribs. Yet Nelson rose again and again, staggering forward, fists still churning. For 41 rounds, the punishment rained down, until in the 42nd, Nelson fouled Gans with a low blow. Disqualified, beaten, Nelson left the ring bloodied but unbroken. He had lost the fight, but his legend as an indestructible warrior grew. 2 years later, on July 4th, 1908, Nelson returned to face Gans once more. This time, in the 17th round, Nelson knocked the old master out. It was a shocking reversal, proof that his endurance could eventually grind down even the most skilled technician. 2 months later, he repeated the feat, knocking out Gans again in the 21st round. The victories cemented Nelson's place in history as a two-time world champion, but the price was steep. Each of those wars left scars, not just on the body, but on the soul. By 1909, Nelson had become a symbol of raw durability. Reporters marveled that he seemed impervious to pain. Doctors examined him and speculated that his nervous system was somehow less sensitive than other men's, that he could withstand blows that would fell 10 opponents. To Nelson, it was simpler. "When I go into the ring," he said, "I want to get in as many punches on the other fellow as possible. And in order to do this, I'm willing to take a few hard raps myself. And I know I can stand them, but standing forever was impossible." In 1910, Nelson faced the fiery challenger Ad Wolgast, a man whose ferocity mirrored his own. Their bout in Richmond, California, would go down as one of the bloodiest spectacles ever witnessed. Round after round, Wolgast and Nelson tore into each other with savage intensity. For 39 rounds, Nelson endured, his face swollen, his body beaten, his ear torn to shreds. By the 40th, blinded by his own blood, he stumbled forward, still swinging. The referee, fearing tragedy, stopped the fight. Nelson protested, insisting he could go on, but his reign was over. He had lost his title, and with it, a part of his identity. Defeat did not silence battling Nelson. Instead, it drove him deeper into the endless cycle of combat. Again and again he returned to the ring, each fight a fresh storm of punishment and defiance. He fought Wolgast twice more, but the results were the same: punishment without victory. Age was creeping in, though Nelson refused to admit it. His face was a patchwork of scars, his ears twisted, his hands brittle from years of abuse. Yet he pressed on, convinced that one more war could restore his glory. The press adored his savagery. They called him the Durable Dane, the human punching bag, the man who could not be knocked out. Crowds paid to see not skill, but spectacle. How much punishment Nelson could endure before even he would collapse. But behind the headlines, there was a man who lived only for the ring. Boxing was not just his career. It was his identity, his refuge, his obsession. Without it, he seemed adrift. As the years dragged on, the defeats piled higher. By 1917, Nelson's career was in ruins. His once iron body betrayed him. He was slower, weaker, his punches lacking sting. Worse, the endless beatings had taken a hidden toll. His speech slurred, his memory faltered, and his judgment wavered. What he had once dismissed as the ordinary aches of battle were signs of permanent damage. Outside the ring, his personal life unraveled. Nelson married, but the union was turbulent. The same fire that made him fearless in combat made him volatile at home. Reports of arguments and instability followed him, and soon his marriage collapsed. Money, once flowing, disappeared. Like many fighters of his era, Nelson was ill-prepared for life beyond the ropes. He had earned purses that should have secured his future, but reckless spending and poor management left him nearly penniless. By the 1920s, the former champion was a shell of the man who had once fought for 42 rounds under the Nevada sun. He attempted comebacks, stepping into the ring when his body had long since quit on him. Crowds no longer came to cheer him as a hero. They came to witness the sad decline of a warrior who could not let go. Each new fight ended the same: defeat, humiliation, more damage. His health crumbled. The endless punishment left him with tremors, confusion, and what doctors then called punch-drunk syndrome, what we now know as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. He wandered through life like a man lost in a fog, sometimes incoherent, sometimes violent. The Durable Dane, who once seemed indestructible, was now broken from within. By the early 1930s, Nelson's decline was tragic and complete. He spent time in institutions, his mind frayed, his body weakened. In 1954, in Chicago, the city where his legend had been born, battling Nelson died at the age of 71. The boy who came from Denmark, who fought his way out of poverty, who defied pain and punishment to capture the lightweight crown, left this world battered, scarred, and largely forgotten by the sport he had once ruled. Yet his legacy endures, not in records or highlight reels, but in the myth of endurance itself. Nelson represented the raw will to fight beyond reason, to stand in the storm and refuse to fall. He was not the most skilled. He was not the most graceful, but he embodied a truth that resonated with working men, immigrants, and dreamers of his time. That survival itself can be a form of victory. When we speak of boxing legends, we often recall artistry, the slick footwork of James John Corbett, the precision of Joe Gans, the ferocity of Jack Dempsey. But battling Nelson's greatness was different. His was the greatness of pain absorbed, of punishment welcomed, of unbreakable resolve. He was a man who seemed to believe that as long as he kept standing, defeat could never claim him fully. Even in his downfall, there is a lesson. Glory built on punishment carries a heavy price. Nelson's life reminds us that the body is not indestructible and that even the fiercest warrior cannot outrun time. But it also reminds us of the depth of human resilience, the stubborn flame that drives a man to rise again, no matter how many times he is struck down. In the silence of history, his story still whispers through the dust of old newspapers and fading photographs. The immigrant boy, who became a two-time world champion, the man who fought for 42 rounds under a desert sun, the champion who refused to quit, even when the world told him it was over. This is the story of battling Nelson.